British media have been abuzz regarding a tell-all interview from Tom Parker Bowles aimed at exposing the truth about Prince William's family.
Buckingham Palace is trembling under the weight of what insiders are calling one of the most disturbing abuse scandals in its history. And the direct victim is none other than 10-year-old Prince George himself. Leaked sources from within palace walls confirmed that a horrifying incident unfolded immediately after dinner. Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's son from her previous marriage, allegedly launched a physical attack on the young heir, grabbing his arm with brutal force and hurling threats at the future king in the darkness of the royal gardens. Even more outrageous, this was not a moment of sudden anger. According to those familiar with the situation, it was a carefully staged trap, a calculated attempt to frame George as a bully and tarnish the reputation of the Prince and Princess of Wales. What Tom and Camilla never expected, however, was that every vile second of their scheme had been silently captured. Princess Kate had secretly installed an independent security camera system, completely separate from the palace network. And that hidden camera recorded everything. This steel-clad evidence would soon become the weapon that shattered the carefully crafted lies of those responsible. Now the question echoes through the palace corridors. When the bloodline of the future king is threatened, how far will Prince William go to protect his son? Will King Charles continue to turn a blind eye, or will he be forced to witness the humiliating expulsion of Camilla's family from the palace walls? And most dangerously of all, how will Princess Kate use that recording to make sure the people behind this betrayal pay the highest possible price? The silence in the royal dining room at Buckingham Palace always bore a facade of perfect deceit. Under the sallow light casting down from the crystal chandeliers, King Charles III gently raised his glass of deep red wine, his eyes reflecting a naive contentment. This private dinner was the monarch's desperate attempt to blur the lines between the royal bloodline and Queen Camilla's external family. There was no bickering, only the rhythmic and cold clinking of cutlery against porcelain plates. The atmosphere, thick with hostility, was carefully concealed beneath layers of silk and silent sneers. Prince William sat rigidly opposite, his entire body exuding a state of high alert. The absence of Princess Kate, who had retreated to her private quarters early, only made William's position feel more isolated. A few seats away, Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla's son, slowly wiped the corners of his mouth with his napkin. Smugness was deeply etched into every feature of his face. He craved the power of this room, yearning to be recognized as a part of a system from which he was destined to be an outsider since birth. When dessert concluded, the children were permitted to leave the stifling banquet table and rush out onto the lawns surrounding the central fountain. Prince George, carrying the weight of the future throne upon his shoulders, walked with a composure that far exceeded a 10-year-old boy. Trailing behind him was Freddie, Tom Parker Bowles' young son, moving with a forced restlessness, his eyes darting around continuously as if searching for a signal. The evening mist began to descend, swallowing the marble statues into the darkness. From a hidden corner behind the dense ivy bordering the side path, Tom Parker Bowles had been standing there, waiting. He had not been in the drawing room smoking cigars with the king. He had slipped out here, blending into the shadows, waiting for a dirty opportunity. The envy running deep in his veins had transformed him into a predator, lurking to pounce on any weakness of the Prince of Wales's family. Freddie tripped over a tree root protruding from the ground, tumbling forward. The young boy clutched his knee, his body curling up on the damp grass, and began to whimper incessantly. That whimpering sound did not carry the genuine panic of a truly hurt child. Rather, it sounded like a meticulously rehearsed play. George instantly spun around. The instinct of an older brother, a future king, taught the values of protection, urged him into action. Without a moment's hesitation, George rushed over, bent down, and extended his small hand to help Freddie to his feet. But before the children's fingers could intertwine, a massive silhouette lunged from the bushes. Tom Parker Bowles emerged. He had no intention of catching his son, who was lying on the ground. Instead, his rough, sinewy hand thrust forward like an iron vise, snatching the right arm of Prince George. The ruthless force of the grip was horrifying. George flinched, his eyes widening in shock. The young prince grimaced as a sudden, sharp pain shot up his bicep, straight to his brain. Tom's fingernails dug deeply through the thin woolen sweater, piercing the child's flesh. He violently yanked George's arm toward him, forcing the boy to stumble forward. George tried to struggle, his eyes betraying sheer terror, yet his teeth remained clamped firmly on his lower lip. The royal blood, coursing through his veins, did not allow him to shed a tear in front of an enemy. Tom's face leaned down to George's eye level, the stench of cigar smoke blowing directly into the child's face. His voice hissed through his teeth, cold and dripping with venom. Don't think that just because you're a prince, you can trample all over others. The physical and mental assault happened so abruptly that it left George rooted to the spot. On the ground below, Freddie sat perfectly still, not shedding a single tear, merely staring blankly as his father physically abused George. However, Tom had severely underestimated the security grid of Buckingham Palace. From 20 meters away, obscured behind a marble pillar of the West Corridor, a protection officer from the SO-14 Special Operations Unit sprang into action. Without needing a single command, the bodyguard charged forward, tearing through the darkness at a terrifying speed. His hand was already resting on the grip of the firearm concealed beneath his suit jacket. Merely from the piercing glare and the ready-to-neutralize stance of the officer emerging from the shadows, Tom flinched. With the reflex of a coward caught red-handed, he let his arm drop. George immediately stepped back 3 paces, his breathing heavy, his left hand tightly cradling his right arm where dark red bruises were already forming. Tom straightened his posture, attempting to smooth out the rumpled lapels of his suit. He reached down and yanked Freddie to his feet, turning his back to stride toward the tea room's entrance. A new script was already being drafted in his mind. The darkness of the garden returned to its eerie silence. But it was the dead calm before an exponential storm was about to sweep through the palace. The royal tea room was bathed in a warm glow. King Charles was relaxing in his armchair, completely oblivious to the sordid affair that had just unfolded on the lawn. Camilla sat beside him, maintaining a flawless smile. The oak doors were violently pushed open. George's protection officer strode in, the air around him thick with tension. He walked straight up to William, bowing his head to deliver a concise, definitive report regarding Tom Parker Bowles's physical restraint of the young prince. The porcelain teacup in Charles's hand froze in midair. William instantly shot up from his seat. Every muscle in his body went rigid, a suffocating, murderous aura radiating from him. But before William could issue an order for an arrest, Tom Parker Bowles stormed into the room, carrying Freddie. In stark contrast to his cruelty in the garden, Tom's face was flush red, playing the role of an utterly outraged father. He set Freddie down next to the sofa and immediately locked eyes with King Charles, transforming himself into the victim of a cowardly framing. Tom boldly declared that he had seen with his own eyes George shove Freddie to the ground. He described the scene using exaggerated terms, painting himself as merely a panicked father who rushed out to intervene, desperate to protect his fragile child from the aggression of the future king. He directly attacked the security detail, claiming that the royal bodyguard, blinded by his duty to protect the bloodline, was pinning false abuse charges on an innocent stepfather. William took a step forward, his gaze looking as if it could incinerate the man standing before him. The fury of a father exploded in his every movement. Camilla immediately joined the fray. She discarded her teacup, stood up, and wrapped her arms around Freddie's shoulders. With the skill of a seasoned manipulator, Camilla didn't raise her voice to argue. Instead, she utilized sentimentality to neutralize William's wrath. Camilla's hand pressed firmly into Freddie's shoulder, silently transmitting a ruthless command. Under the invisible pressure from his own family, the timid child nodded, parroting the pre-fed lies, confirming that George was indeed the bully. A heavy silence enveloped the room. The words of a child were the dirtiest weapon the outsiders could use to turn the tables. King Charles squeezed his eyes shut and wearily offered words of appeasement, attempting to compress this dreadful abuse into a mere misunderstanding between the children, all to preserve the veneer of a harmonious family. Charles's compromise was like pouring gasoline on the roaring fire of William's fury. He adamantly demanded that George be brought in for a confrontation, refusing to accept his son being smeared by such blatant lies. Sensing the king waver, Tom immediately escalated the conflict. He shed his facade of patience, loudly attacking the Wales family for constantly looking down upon and trampling his own. He demanded an official apology from George, a move designed to directly humiliate the line of succession. The outsiders were backing William into a corner. There was no third-party witness carrying enough weight. The bodyguard's testimony was being invalidated by a child's fake tears and the cowardice of a monarch. At that exact moment, on the third floor of the palace, Princess Kate sat in a darkened room. She had withdrawn to maintain a cool head, but her mind remained locked onto the safety of her children. The phone on her glass table vibrated violently. A red-bordered notification flashed from a highly encrypted security application. The covert camera system that she and William had secretly installed, completely independent of the palace network that Camilla could interfere with. Kate unlocked the screen. An infrared, close-up video of the fountain area had just been uploaded. She pressed play. The blue light cast onto her stoic face. The black and white imagery clearly displayed every movement. The audio captured by the directional microphone pumped directly into her ears. The blood in Kate's veins seemed to freeze, only to instantly boil over like molten lava. Any semblance of restraint was wiped away. She stood up abruptly, grabbing the tablet off the table. There was no more time for fake pleasantries. Kate threw on her coat and marched out into the corridor. Every click of her heels against the marble floor echoed like the sound of an unappealable death sentence. They had awoken the most terrifying force of all, a mother protecting her child's throne. Down in the tea room, the tension was as tight as a violin string about to snap. Camilla was still playing the role of the aggrieved peacemaker to perfection, continuously using soft words to pressure King Charles into stepping up to protect her son's honor. William stood frozen in the center of the room, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. He was teetering on the edge of using direct physical force to throw his adversary out. The brass doorknob suddenly twisted with force. The dry screech of the hinges cut sharply through the tearful charade. Princess Kate walked in. The fragile demeanor of a woman feigning illness had completely vanished, replaced by the commanding presence of someone holding the power of life and death. She didn't spare King Charles a glance, nor did she look in Camilla's direction. She marched in a straight line toward the central tea table, bringing with her an aura so lethal the room's temperature felt as though it had dropped several degrees. In her hands was the black leather-cased tablet, the weapon that would alter the entire landscape. She swung her arm, slamming the tablet down onto the glass table. The sharp, resounding crash forced everyone into utter silence. The device slid and stopped right in front of King Charles and Tom. The screen was still blazing bright. Kate whipped her head around, her blazing eyes pinning the draining color of her enemy's face. She uttered only a single, chilling and fatal question. "How do you explain the fact that you were hiding in those bushes 10 minutes before the children even appeared?" Tom's face lost all its color. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. Before he could even formulate a reaction, Kate's slender finger pressed firmly onto the play button on the screen. The high-definition, black-and-white footage began to roll. It didn't start from the moment Freddie fell. It began 5 minutes prior. The image of Tom Parker Bowles was crystal clear. He was roughly pulling Freddie's arm into a dark, obscured corner behind the ivy. Tom's voice, processed by an audio filter that removed background noise, rang out distinctly, striking the ears of everyone present. "Listen to me, Freddie. In a minute, when you run past George, run close to him and pretend to trip. Fall hard, and remember to scream as loud as you can. I will run out immediately. I will handle the rest." The footage fast-forwarded, the moment Freddie threw himself to the ground. George running out with an outstretched hand to help. And then, the undeniable evidence appeared. Tom lunging from the bushes like a cowardly predator. He snatched George's arm, squeezing it so hard the child twisted in pain and spat out his vulgar threats. There was absolutely no scuffle, not a single push from the young prince. It was all a trap. A perfect, filthy trap aimed at a 10-year-old boy simply to satisfy a cowardly jealousy. The screen went black, leaving behind a dead, suffocating silence. Tom's noble mask of victimhood shattered into a million pieces. He stumbled back a step, bumping hard into the armrest of a chair, his body trembling uncontrollably. Any attempt to justify himself now was utterly meaningless in the face of glaring physical evidence. Camilla collapsed into her seat like a puppet with cut strings. Her face was ashen, her heavy makeup unable to conceal her sheer terror. Both her hands clawed tightly into the armrests. Every effort to whitewash the situation, every single excuse, had been mercilessly ground into dust by this ironclad proof. King Charles stared blankly at the device. Utter shock washed over his eyes. He had indulged them, he had doubted his own royal bloodline for their sake. And in return, they used his trust to trap and physically abuse his own grandson. A profound disappointment stripped the monarch of any ability to speak. William's wrath did not erupt in the form of out-of-control screaming. It descended with the absolute, ruthless, and destructive authority of a future king. He took a long stride forward, a flick of his wrist sending Tom's expensive teacup crashing to the floor. The sharp sound of shattering porcelain echoed through the room. William did not waste another word on the man who had abused his son. He turned to the royal protection detail, standing rigidly at the door, and gave a slight tilt of his chin, a silent command. 4 towering SO-14 officers, their expressions as cold as machines, instantly swarmed in. They did not ask King Charles for permission. They took their orders directly from the Prince of Wales. 2 of them lunged forward, roughly grabbing Tom by both biceps and twisting his arms violently behind his back. Despite his futile struggles, they forced the villain to bend over in a deeply humiliating posture. William ordered the entire Parker Bowles family to be thrown out of the palace that very night. Anyone bearing his surname who stepped through the main gates from this moment forward would face physical suppression without warning. Dragged down the long corridor, Tom's resistance was reduced to nothing but helpless groans. The sound of leather soles dragging across the floor, mingled with Freddie's panicked cries, gradually faded and died out as the massive ironwood doors slammed shut. The punishment was instantaneous, stripping away all honor and privilege from the man who dared lay a hand on royal blood. Inside the room, a panicked Camilla reached her hand out toward Charles, but the king had already turned his face away. He leaned both hands against the windowsill, turning his back entirely on the chaos. The final wall of power the outsiders had clung to had completely collapsed. William slowly turned around, walking right up to Camilla. His eyes held not a single ounce of mercy. In a thick, low voice, he declared that all tolerance had come to an end. Her dirty game of power was over. Kate stood shoulder to shoulder with her husband, forming an unbreakable, unified front. She dropped a threat as sharp as a razor blade. If Camilla ever dared to interfere in the lives of her children again, this video would instantly appear on the desks of every major editor-in-chief in the world. The ultimate humiliation enveloped the Queen. But the retribution didn't stop at expelling an abuser. The very next morning, a series of covert maneuvers originating from the Prince of Wales' office, met with the silent consent of King Charles, were set into motion. Camilla's privileges, her independent operating budgets, and her public appearances at major events were abruptly slashed. The process of gradually stripping away the power and title of a queen was being executed quietly, but with absolute ruthlessness. There was no public proclamation, but everyone within the system understood. Camilla's empire was entering its final days. The Black Range Rover tore through the night as it left the gates of Buckingham Palace, carrying away the bitterly defeated. Behind those closed iron gates, justice had been definitively served. Inside, only the absolute protection of those carrying the true bloodline remained, and the price paid for betrayal was losing everything. The events of this night had dealt a fatal blow to the power of the outsiders, but the shadows within the palace had never truly dissipated. King Charles had chosen to stand aside during William's purge. How will this decision to turn his back on his wife's family affect the stability of the throne in the final days of his life? Share your thoughts with us in the comment section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.